My parents kicked me out to let my golden sister live there, even though I bought the house. But karma came faster than expected. I, 37 years old, have spent the last 15 years advancing my career as a senior manager at one of Wall Street's top investment firms. This story centers on my complex relationship with my sister Emily, 47 female, my parents, both in their late 70s, and a house I recently purchased for them that has been the source of frequent family tension. I need to take you back to the beginning to explain how we got here. My parents were in their late 40s when I was born, making me an unplanned child. My mother would regularly tell me that they already had Emily, who was 10 years old at the time, and that she was more than enough. She didn't say this maliciously, but rather in a tone that made things worse. She would say, "We didn't plan for you," as she was organizing Emily's extracurricular activities or preparing her college application paperwork. These simple remarks, which served as a continual reminder of my status as an afterthought in our family, formed the context of my early years. I might not be here if it hadn't been for my maternal grandparents' persistence. My parents saw me as an unexpected burden, but they were overjoyed at the prospect of having a second grandchild. I was an afterthought in my parents' lives, and it was clear immediately away. They followed the same routine every morning when they dropped me off at my grandparents' house. My father would say to my grandfather, "You wanted her," as he prepared to go to work, keys jingling in his palm. "She's all yours." My grandparents' house became my true home, a place where I felt genuinely loved and wanted. They made sure I was fed and cared for, picked me up from school, assisted me with my homework, and drove me to the park. My grandfather, a retired math professor, spent hours teaching me about numbers and problem solving. He'd add, "Numbers never lie," and these lessons would later affect my professional decisions in unexpected ways, such as they tell stories more honestly than people do. Every afternoon, at their kitchen table, my grandmother would help me with my schoolwork, ensuring that I understood everything. Her patience seemed inexhaustible. She had taught high school before retiring. She would add, "Knowledge is the one thing nobody can take away from you," in a stern yet sympathetic tone. She also taught me to cook as a way to express my creativity and passion, rather than as a chore. These days spent in their kitchen, reviewing my school day and learning how to precisely measure items, became some of my most treasured memories. My parents, who were generally weary and frustrated by the trip, would only come to pick me up late at night. "Madison," my grandmother would say as she bade me goodnight every night, "you're the best thing that ever happened to us." I could almost forget that I wasn't wanted anywhere else while I was wrapped in her loving arms. They became my emotional rock, providing me with the security and affection that I sorely lacked at home. My grandfather would frequently add, "Remember, sometimes the best things in life aren't planned." I learned to live as an afterthought in my own home as Emily prepared for her bright future. My sister simply pretended that I didn't exist. She was not mean or cruel. She'd be lying on the couch, talking on the phone about men and college applications, completely unconscious of me, while I played with my dolls in the corner of our shared living room. The difference in how my parents handled Emily and me was obvious and continuous. My mother's delighted voice could be heard as she discussed Emily's accomplishments with relatives and friends. Emily got straight A's again. Emily made the debate team, or Emily got accepted to her dream college. They attended all of her school activities, science fairs, and debating contests. They repeatedly used, "We're too tired," "We have to work," or "You understand, don't you?" as reasons for their conspicuous absence from my events. My grandparents served as my cheerleaders, attending every school activity with excitement and genuine pride on their faces. I hoped that Emily's departure to college would bring about changes at home. I was the daughter who stayed, and maybe my parents would finally see me. I was totally mistaken. At 14 years old, I went from being invisible to being the housekeeper. My mother would scream out to me, "Madison," before I could even set down my backpack after school. "The house needs cleaning. Start with the bathrooms." I took over Emily's jobs, as well as a number of other responsibilities. I learned the washing machine's settings and quirks by heart, and it became my constant companion. Cleaning, cooking, and maintaining a home for parents who barely noticed my presence seemed like an endless cycle of housekeeping. My father would say, "You live here, you must contribute," if I hesitated even slightly. "Your sister always did her part." My career moved from cleaning to cooking by the age of 14. The change was not gradual. My mother abruptly stopped preparing dinner one day. One morning, she said, "You're old enough now. We expect dinner ready when we get home from work." Despite the demands of domestic life, I maintained a high academic position. My teachers encouraged me to compete in a range of academic competitions after noting my aptitude in economics and mathematics. To help me prepare, My grandfather would spend extra time teaching me sophisticated concepts that were far beyond my grade level. He would exclaim, "You have a gift with numbers," with pride in his eyes. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Dreaming about college was the only way I could escape. Every night, when I finished doing the dishes, I would retire to my room and browse educational websites. I imagined myself touring numerous campuses, far from the never-ending tasks and frigid silences. I got rewarded for my hard work in school. Despite my household obligations, I maintained straight A's, and by the age of 16, I had gotten acceptance letters from a number of famous universities, including several well known for their outstanding finance programs. Emily's engagement followed. One Sunday afternoon, she dashed in the front door, dragging a tall, well-dressed man with her. She squealed, "Mom! Dad! This is James, we're getting married." It would appear that someone had just announced their lottery victory. My parents literally sprang out of their seats, with my mother sobbing with glee and my father quickly reaching for his phone to call family. "We'll cover everything," my mother said as she hugged Emily. "Our first daughter's wedding has to be perfect." For months our house was filled with wedding preparations. Every discussion revolved around guest lists, venues, and flowers. With pricey clothing, high-end vendors, and everything at the top, money seemed to flow like water. Despite attending the wedding, my grandparents did not appear to like the elaborate decorations. My grandfather simply shook his head at the champagne fountain, and I watched my grandmother grimace at a sculpture that probably cost more than a semester's tuition at college. However, they most likely already knew what was going to happen, so they kept their thoughts to themselves. On the day I received my admission letters, I sat at our dinner table with 3 envelopes spread out in front of me and told my parents the fantastic news. My heart pounded. "That's nice," my mother said, not lifting her attention from her meal. "But we can't pay for it. We spent all our savings on your sister's wedding. Even took out a loan for it. There's nothing left for college." I stuttered and added, "But you paid for Emily's college," barely audible above a whisper. "That was different," my mother stated with a dismissive tone. "We saw potential in her." The ensuing silence was deafening. "You should get a job, save some money, and get student loans. That's what responsible adults do," my father added between phrases. I'd never dared to leave the table without being excused. I grabbed my phone with shaky hands and dialed my grandmother. I was crying within minutes of entering their well-known front door. My grandfather's demeanor stiffened as he listened to my story, but I couldn't see the glitter in his eyes. They exchanged a knowing look after I told them everything. My grandfather grabbed my hand and said, "Madison, we've been saving for your education since the day you were born, so we were expecting something like this." He came back with a folder after strolling to his study. Bank statements reflecting years of diligent savings were discovered inside. "You can choose any of those universities. We've got you covered." I moved in with my grandparents that evening after packing my belongings. When I told my parents I was leaving, they were downstairs watching television and barely looked up. My mother said, "Whatever you think is best," with her gaze fixated on the television. Did I sense relief in her voice? The years that followed were revolutionary. I opted to attend one of the top business schools to study financial analysis. Witnessing my parents' terrible financial management may have fueled my desire to do things right. My lecturers noticed my eagerness and innate financial skills. Before long, I was staying after class to discuss challenging financial concepts. For the first time in my life, someone other than my grandparents recognized my true ability. During my academic years, I was fortunate enough to secure prestigious internships at major financial firms. Every summer brought new opportunities as well as obstacles. Senior managers were impressed by my analytical skills and meticulousness. During my performance assessment at Morgan Stanley, my boss said, "You've got a natural instinct for this. We'd love to have you back next summer." With the exception of phone conversations with my grandparents, I kept my head down and focused on my academics, rarely thinking about my family. Following my graduation, I was hired by one of the city's biggest financial organizations. I never envisioned receiving the starting salary. I found a nice, clean, and secure one-bedroom apartment. Every morning, I was thankful that I didn't have to prepare breakfast for anyone other than myself. As I immersed myself in each new challenge, my career took off, and I received incentives and promotions that I could not have imagined when I was younger. In 5 years, I worked my way up to a senior position, managing complex portfolios and cultivating strong client relationships. Within the industry, I was known for my strategic thinking and analytical accuracy. Every accomplishment felt like a hidden confirmation that my parents underestimate my skills. Meanwhile, I realized from rare conversations with my grandparents that Emily's marketing career was not going as well as she had hoped. Emily's husband James battled to keep his work. They were constantly begging for money from my parents. My grandmother informed me during one of our monthly calls, "Your mother emptied her retirement account last month to help them with rent. They just can't say no to her." After a year, the situation deteriorated. Even with our parents' help, Emily and James were no longer able to pay their rent. They and their twins, then 7, returned to my former bedroom. My parents, who had previously been very satisfied with Emily's accomplishments, now had to provide for her entire family, in addition to their golden child. I kept my distance, focusing on my own personal and professional development. Every bonus, promotion, and successful transaction served as a subliminal reminder that I wasn't the failure that my parents had prophesied. By my mid-30s, I had large investments and savings, including enough for a down payment on my own home. Then everything changed. My grandfather died unexpectedly from a massive heart attack. It was a devastating loss. He was the father figure who had stood by me when no one else did, and he was more than simply a grandfather to me. After that, my grandmother, who had been with him for over 50 years, appeared to lose her spark. She followed him less than 2 months later. In every way, they were my biological parents, and they were abruptly gone. I heard my mother's voice behind me at the funeral home as I was preparing for my grandmother's service. "Madison, do you want some help with the arrangements?" When I turned back, she stood there, appearing older and more worn out than I remembered. A part of me wanted to tell her to leave, but I stopped due to her expression. "Sure," I replied to myself. "That would be nice." My parents began to open up over the next few days, as we prepared for the service. They admitted that they were experiencing issues. One afternoon, when we were selecting flowers, my father revealed, "We haven't been financially well off since retirement." He went on to remark, "We barely make ends meet," before mentioning Emily's twins. I saw that my sister and her family remained to live with them and rely on their declining income. 1 week after my grandmother's funeral, we met in a wood-paneled office to read her will. Emily and James were slumped in recliners next to my parents, and I sat across from them. The tension was thick enough to serve with a knife, and the room smelled like furniture polish and old papers. Though none of us understood it at the time, what happened next would set off a chain of events that would forever change our family's connections. After adjusting his glasses, Mr. Patterson, the notary, began reading in monotone. I expected the normal legalese, but what followed caught everyone's attention. "To our beloved granddaughter Madison, we leave our house at 1542 Maple Street and the sum of $150,000. The ensuing silence was deafening. My mother tightened her grip on my father's arm until her knuckles turned white, and Emily's mouth dropped open. After clearing his throat, Mr. Patterson continued on. He looked at my mother and added, "And a personal note from Mr. Henderson to his daughter Margaret." The message stated, "Remember, Margaret, that we gave you $200,000 right when you needed it most. We want you to respect our ultimate judgment just as much as we did your demands back then." My mother's cheeks became pale after flaming red. Emily and James exchanged nervous glances, while my father focused on the floor. My parents approached me in the parking lot after the notary had completed his paperwork. Something urgent had replaced the placid demeanor they had maintained during funeral preparations. My mother spoke in a weak voice. "Madison, honey. You must understand that we always assumed we'd inherit the house. We're having trouble, but we were counting on it. With the mortgage and Emily's family expenses, we could really use the house," my father said, caressing his gray hair. Emily joined in on the conversation about her children's desire for a yard to play in, but I simply drove away. Over the next few weeks, I continued thinking about my grandparents' parting present. My life had settled closer to the city, and while the house I had inherited had many valuable memories, it was too big for me to live alone. In the meantime, I learned about my parents' mounting financial woes from our weekly conversations. Helping Emily and her family had depleted their retirement money, and they were finding it increasingly difficult to repay their own mortgage. I gave it a lot of thought before deciding I would buy my parents a better house, one that is single-story, has a wonderful garden, but is easier to maintain, with the money I get from selling my grandparents' house and my own funds, and something snug for their retirement years. When I told them about my idea, they burst out in tears of joy. After several weeks of house hunting, we finally found the ideal location. A lovely ranch-style house with huge entrances and no steps in a calm neighborhood. My parents couldn't stop gushing about how happy they were after the purchase was finalized. "A good housewarming party is exactly what we need," my father said. "It is the least we can do to make all the arrangements." "That would be lovely," I answered, planning to show them the deed during the festivities. "Tell me when, please?" Weeks passed by. Even though I had a lot of work to do, I continued waiting for an invitation. "Oh," my mother would remark, "we're still planning. You are aware that these tasks require time." My father would also add, "We want it to be perfect? We'll notify you shortly." I was annoyed by their evasive responses for some reason. One evening, after another evasive phone call from my mother, I was entering Emily's name into Facebook. We were not connected on any social media platforms, and I hadn't seen her profile in years. Only hours ago, it was posted. "I'm very excited for Mom and Dad's housewarming party this Saturday. I can't wait to celebrate with everyone in this stunning home." Numerous friends and family members confirmed their attendance in scores of comments on the page, which included pictures of caterers being hired and decorations being set up. This wasn't an accidental gathering, weeks had been spent planning it. I called my mother with shaky fingers. "Hello, Mom. I wanted to ask more about the housewarming party. Do you have a date in mind already?" "Oh honey, not just yet," she responded with ease. "Most likely in a few weeks. The logistics are still being worked out. Everyone except me, apparently." As Saturday approached, I had to make a decision. Should I approach them, or should I let it go? How could they exclude me from the festivities after everything that had happened, after I had bought them this house? I would soon find out, but not in the way I had expected. On Saturday, I parked a block from the house I had bought for my parents, and I could see dozens of people mingling through the windows, including Emily's social circle, friends, and relatives. My father gave tours of the house, and my mother, dressed in her special occasion pearls, greeted guests at the entrance. The home was decked with twinkling lights and welcoming banners, and laughter and music streamed out onto the street, indicating that they had spent weeks planning this housewarming party, to which I had not been invited. For a time, I sat in my car and watched Emily's twins chase each other past throngs of adults who were ogling them. I could see moving boxes with Emily's handwriting on them heaped in the corner through the big bay window. The process of transporting her family's goods had already begun. I sniffed carefully before sneaking in via the side entrance. The aroma of flowers and catered cuisine filled the home, and I followed my father's voice to the living room, where he was conversing with a group of people. After all these years of hard labor, we finally got our dream home. My mother excitedly added, "Don't forget about Emily. She was quite helpful with the down payment. Such a beautiful daughter, always putting family first. Unlike some people," she said. In response to an inquiry concerning me, she stated, "Our younger daughter has not assisted us at all. Too preoccupied with her profession to worry about her family." As I stood in the doorway, heat surged to my face. Everyone jumped when I said, "Actually, I think you've got that backwards." There was complete stillness in the room, and my father was the first to recover, smirking fiercely. "Madison, what a surprise. Especially since you forgot to invite me to the housewarming party for the house I bought," I stated as I entered the room. His shoes rapidly drew Emily's husband's curiosity, and one of the twins grabbed Emily's sleeve in an attempt to figure out why everyone seemed so disturbed. "You bought it, but it is now ours. You can't expect eternal gratitude," my mother remarked, slightly harsh. My father added, "That's correct," gaining confidence. "And really, you're not welcome here. This is a family reunion." My mom informed me that Emily and her family had already sold their home and will be relocating here. The twins require a stable environment. I pulled a folder from my bag. "You appear to be puzzled about something," I said, holding up the ownership and deed certificates. "This house belongs to me. I never signed it over to you." My mother's face turned pale to ashen, and my father began to rattle on about his family responsibilities. Emily's self-assured smirk cracked as she saw her plans were failing. Despite my quivering hands, I continued. "I was intending to give it to you tonight," maintaining a solid voice. "I believed this could be a new beginning for all of us. Instead, you have shown me that nothing has changed." My mother said, "You can't do this?" Her voice became a shriek. "We are your parents." "No," I replied softly. "You're merely the ones who gave birth to me. My true parents, my grandparents, showed me that family is more than just blood. They also taught me about finances, which is why I own this house while you do not." I turned to address the surprised guests. "I'm sorry, but this celebration is finished. This is my residence, and I am asking everyone to leave." My parents, Emily, James, the twins, and all of their guests left in tears, and I watched from the porch as they drove away one by one until the street was desolate. The beautiful lights in the yard continued to twinkle mockingly. Half-empty drinks and discarded meal plates littered every surface, and the house, which was supposed to be my reconciliation present, became the final straw in our relationship. A few weeks later, I discovered that they had used the money from the sale of their previous home to buy an apartment, and when Emily, James, and the twins moved in, 3 generations crammed into a 2-bedroom flat. They tried phoning me all the time at first, leaving voicemails full of angry accusations. "You've become so heartless, just like your grandparents warned us you would." And guilt-tripping. "How could you have done this to your own family?" I turned down their social media accounts, emails, and phone numbers. As a reminder of all that went wrong in our family, the house is now empty, and I have an appointment with a real estate agent tomorrow. Some relationships, like old photos in a dusty album, are best left in the past. When I ultimately have my own children, I've promised myself that they won't have to compete for my attention or win my devotion. Unlike my parents, I'll love my children unconditionally, just as my grandparents did. That Saturday night, when I arrived at the house I had bought, I was not invited to my parents' housewarming party, which revealed every terrible truth about my family. The windows revealed dozens of visitors, catered food and, most tellingly, moving boxes strewn about with Emily's handwriting. My father joyfully stated, "After all our hard work, we have finally purchased our dream home." I sneaked in by the side entrance. In her comments, my mother commended Emily for purportedly assisting with the down payment. She addressed questions about my absence with, "Oh, Madison's too focused on her career to care about family." The incident encapsulated every insult I had experienced as a child, every instance of favoritism toward Emily, and every instance in which I had been treated as an afterthought. I had never before experienced such clarity as I stood in the doorway, witnessing my parents rewrite history by preparing to relocate my sister's family onto my land without even asking me. "Actually," I remarked, prompting the room to settle down, "I believe there was a miscommunication regarding the buyer of this house." I could tell everything I needed to know about their true sentiments based on their facial expressions: amazement, shame, and ultimately indignation. My mother was the first to recover, her voice full with entitlement. "What's done is done. The house is ours today, and Emily's family requires the room." I got out the ownership documents and the property deed and said, "No, the house is mine. I never handed ownership to you. I had planned to deliver it to you tonight, but that would clearly be a mistake. You cannot do this." My mother said in a panicked tone, "We are your parents, we have rights." "The only rights you have," I continued calmly, "are those I choose to grant you. And right now, I've decided to ask everyone to leave my land." Following that, there was a chaotic evacuation, with guests rushing out with plates of food still in hand, Emily's twins screaming in surprise, and my father attempting to maintain some dignity while directing everyone to their cars. "How could you do this to your own family?" was my mother's final attempt at manipulation, but it was unsuccessful against my newfound drive. In the weeks that followed, the 5 of them were jammed into a tiny flat, and the messages began straight away. My father wanted a re-examination, Emily begged with tears for her children's stability, and my mother accused me of cruelty, all of which I blocked. The unoccupied house served as a reminder of what could have been. A new beginning, a chance for reconciliation. Instead, it acted as the catalyst for my ultimate split from a family that had never completely accepted me. A month later, I sold it and used the money to fund my own future. Some asked if I would ever try to mend those bridges or forgive them, but I came to realize that forgiving does not always imply allowing harmful people back into your life. Forgiving oneself for leaving can be necessary at times. Before putting away my parents' old wedding photos, I told my future children that they would never know the agony of conditional love, the pain of being compared to a sibling, or doubt their place in the family. With me, the cycle of partiality and emotional blackmail would come to an end. When I last drove by my parents' apartment complex, Emily's twins were playing in the tiny courtyard, and I briefly felt sad, but it was for relationships that never actually existed in the first place, not for those I had lost. Despite the common assumption that blood is thicker than water, my grandparents taught me that a true family is built on love, respect, and mutual support. I carry these lessons with me as I begin this new era of my life. Love should be freely given rather than demanded, family is more than simply DNA, and walking away is often the best course of action. I removed my mother's last unread email because I didn't open it, and any defenses or charges it included were no longer important. I had finally learned how to prioritize my own worth over their conditional acceptance. Their kind of familial loyalty has no place in the life I'm establishing today. New chances await us in the future, free of the burden of seeking to acquire affection from those who are unwilling to freely give it. My grandparents taught me what a true family looks like, and I hope to create one for myself eventually, one built on mutual respect, unconditional love, and the understanding that each individual is equally valuable. Finally, the chapter of being the family afterthought is gone, and becoming the author of my own life is merely the beginning.